fortunate to have this first collaboration amongst three wonderful artists and scholars. Stuart Hecht of Boston College, who specializes in Jews and their contribution to American music, issues of assimilation, and drawing from their tradition and how that was transposed into American culture and song. His book will be available for sale and signing care of 8 cousins, with whom we often collaborate, and that will be at the reception following our 2-set program. Our musicians today are John Murelle, my beloved voice teacher, a well-known and beloved baritone here on the Cape, and it's our pleasure to welcome Merrill for the first time here, just a very talented pianist. So as I've heard them, this is going to be educational as well as thoroughly entertaining. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm Stuart Hecht, and I have this is John Murelle, and this is Bill Merrill, and we are going to be talking and presenting and entertaining and demonstrating, we hope, about the Jewish voice in American song, which is a rich subject, and we've been having a lot of fun working on it already, and we hope that you find it, what should we call it, entertaining and enlightening, because it's both. We're going to start off really, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. I'm going to give you the shape of the program, but I'm not going to tell you what's in it. Because part of the fun of it for us is to say, almost like the song is the punchline, if you will. You see what I'm saying? Our hope is you go, oh, that one! Yeah? That's the goal. And the program is in 4 parts. I call them clusters. And I'll introduce each one as we go along. In general speaking, though, we're talking about the Jewish voice in American music, as we said, and the Jewish voice in some ways, so to be able to talk about that, I want to talk just a little bit about the background of Jews in music, I suppose, in America. Not too much, but just a little bit. We were talking about this the other day, well, how come you have so many of these great songwriters? Every single Broadway composer of note I was just seeing if you were paying attention. Except for Cole Porter, who was Jewish. Every single one. Starting from really Jerome Kern in about 1912. So, I mean, it's really remarkable that there's something going on there, why is that, where's this coming from, and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that Jews historically didn't really have much of an arts tradition. It goes back to the whole notion of, the thou shalt nots, in terms of graven images and stuff like that, right? But in Europe, there was certainly calligraphy, because you were the Bible, the Torah, and there were certainly ceremonial things that were designed. So you'll have stuff going back to, like the 12th century that are like ceremonial plates for like Passover and things like that. But always had a religious reason for it, There were also Purim spiels. And Purim, right? And for those of you who don't know, Purim is a celebration of freedom from oppression. And the story is the Megillah, which I learned as a small child because there was a cartoon. What was it? We are so cool. It's a Megillah gorilla. Wow, what a coincidence. I didn't know that he was Jewish. Anyway, but people would get dressed up in just crazy, silly costumes and have fun and dance with the children and so on and so forth, and make noisemakers and all sorts of stuff like that. And then there was also the tumblers, who were performers in these small villages and stuff, usually at weddings. And then the tradition of tumblers, that's where people like Danny Kaye came from, Sid Caesar, the entertainer, the jester, if you will. So that stuff happened. But I think really when you boil down to music, it comes down to probably just the tradition of prayer itself. And if you think about it, there's laning, which is a term used to describe Jewish prayer, which means it's not just you say the words, you also chant them. And if you think about it, the words and the music, the chanting corresponds to the meaning of the words. So there really isn't a separation between words and ideas. There's a wonderful quote I did sense the other day by Yip Harburg, where it's something along the lines of a word is an idea and a song is a feeling. I'm sorry, and music is a feeling, and song gives feeling to ideas. So we're going to be talking about Yip Harburg here. So I think that's really pertinent here too. And a number of the great composers, three of them in particular, and I'm talking specifically, were Irving Berlin and Yip Harburg. No, it's all right. I'm sorry. Irving Berlin, Harold Arlen, and Kurt Weill. All of them we're going to be meeting today a little bit. Their fathers were cantors. So they're coming from this liturgical background. There's some really cool books out there where they say, oh, and here's actually the original liturgy, and here's this pop song, you know? You say, like Paper Moon, wow, it actually came from Yiddish. Anyway, so that's kind of where the background of all this stuff comes from. And of course, the quirks of anybody and weird stuff like the Gershwins, where George Gershwin is considered a musical genius, right? But do you realize there's absolutely nobody else in his family that had any musical talent whatsoever? So you go, where's it come from? I mean, these are just questions. These are mysteries that will never be fully answered. Anyway, Jews came to America in the 17th century. Most of them came from Germany. German Jews, there were Sephardic traditions too. And a lot of them were very determined in sort of the German tradition to be assimilated and to pass as Americans, for lack of a better word. So the first cluster of stuff we're going to do is really looking at that kind of stuff. There's several songs written by people basically of that tradition who saw themselves as Americans. They didn't advertise the fact that they were Jewish, and maybe some of them didn't want to know people to know that they were Jewish. Maybe they didn't want to be Jewish themselves anyway. Who knows? But what's very clear in this first cluster is that we're talking about material that is well, Americana. Or as I put it here, I didn't know a Jewish person wrote that. Okay? So we're going to begin, and what I'm going to try and do, with John's help here, or I'm going to try and help John, or we're going to help each other, I think is the way we tend to do stuff here, is to sort of set up each of the songs and to give you a context for it. And hopefully the song itself will be kind of like a, oh my God, epiphany, right? Peripateia. So the first song of our program, and this is so my first section, my first cluster is called Jewish Americana. It's really Americana, but by Jews. And the first song was written by a guy who wrote an opera in 1823. He was an actor. He was from America. He actually spent most of his life in England, though, and stuff. But he did come back to the States eventually, and the thing was that he was, as I say, Jewish, and two things about it. First thing with him was after he had this acting career and he wrote all this stuff and relative success, he comes back to America and he thinks, you know, I'm going to spend time with the Cherokee Indians. Anybody want to guess why? Because he thought they might be the 10 tribes. God's truth. You know? He might have been right, who knows? You know? And then he ends up being appointed the ambassador to Tunisia. It's sort of like that. And he actually died there, natural causes. Anyway, but this is, John's going to perform the first of our songs. And I will say that one little more fun fact I can tell you, this song was actually banned during the Civil War. And the reason was because the officers feared it would incite desertions. How's that? So without any further ado, Maestro. So you get the flavor. I mean, oh my gosh, and I call that like the American sampler. You know, that was on the wall of all the log cabins written in hand stitch, you know. So the second song, in similar spirit, was written by a guy named Charles K. Harris. It was for an 1892 Broadway smash called The Trip to Chinatown. And in which, oh, I kid you not, it really was a big hit. Yeah, and this is the big hit of the show. And the story in the show is that you have these sort of waspy American types, young people, and they're going, gee, let's do something kind of exciting and interesting. I know, we'll be exotic and go to Chinatown. And we said, today we have dim sum. Nothing different, you know? But that's what it's about. And in this kind of show in those days, the way it worked was someone would stumble upon a piano on stage and just say, oh, I just happen to know a melody, and they'll just start to play something, you know? Randomly, and this is one of the things that was played, and it became the biggest seller in Tin Pan Alley history, written by a nice Jewish boy. That was such a popular song that in 1927, Oscar Hammerstein teamed with Jerome Kern to write their masterpiece, which was Showboat. And they wanted to have a song in there that really, the audience would go, oh yeah, that's nostalgic, we all sort of know that. It's the only song, they call it interpolate. They used to do that, they would stick a random song in. It's the only song in Showboat that was interpolated in, and it was After the Ball. So there you go. So, you know, Americana, right? Anyway, but the spirit continues. You have the rise of Tin Pan Alley, which is its own fun story. And many people are trying to write songs just because they want to sell sheet music. You know, today people download. You know, right? My day it was like buy the 45, the records, right? But in those days it was the sheet music. You know, because people had whatever. Anyway, so this is written by a guy who was Episcopalian. Well, the composer is Episcopalian, but he married a Jewish vaudeville star named Nora Bayes. Remember her? Oh, poor Nora. That's why I have to mention her, right? We have to spread the gospel of Nora Bayes. She and he wrote a song, actually a lovely song, it's an Americana classic called Shine On, no, did I get it right? Did I get that right? Yeah, Shine On Harvest Moon. That was her big hit, yeah. But anyway, her husband, who I'm focusing on, he wrote the lyrics to a song, and the music was written by a Jewish guy, so we're within our realm here. And he also wrote a couple other songs, by the way. He wrote I'll Be With You in Apple Blossom Time. And he wrote perhaps my favorite title of all time, Oh, How She Could Yacky Hacky Wiki Wacky Woo. and this is a guy named Albert von Tilzer. And Albert's older brother, Harry, also wrote songs. He wrote Only a Girl, A Bird in a Gilded Cage, and Wait Till the Sun Shines Belly. These wonderful American songs, really funny stuff. But this song perhaps has had, without question, has had the greatest play, and which is pertinent today. I'll leave it at that for you to ponder on from a pun point of view.
Some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never
about that. And the funny thing about that song is that neither of the composers actually went to a baseball game until decades after the song. Right? It's, I think of the Beach Boys, like none of them actually surfed, you know? So it's sort of the same idea. And as a side note for Red Sox fans, there's another anthem that's often sung at Red Sox games. What's that? And it was also written by a Jew, Neil Diamond. So, hello, you know, right? Come to America. Anyway, and let it not be said that other parts of American life were not also touched by Jews who were, like, you know, proclaiming themselves not to be Jews, at least commercially. And there's a wonderful story about this guy, and he had a job. He actually was from New Jersey. I think he went to, I forget if it was Dartmouth or Princeton, something like that. And he gets a job at Montgomery Ward in Kansas City. And this is in the late 30s. He's married. His wife sadly is terminally ill, sadly. Meanwhile, part of the story is that Montgomery Ward is saying, you know, Christmas season's coming up, and we want to make sure that we have some kind of special something as a promotion. I know, let's see, if someone on the staff can actually write a original Christmas story, you know, and we can make it into a book and distribute it to all the children. And that's what they did. It was huge hit with them. So anyway, time passes, and a decade later, his brother-in-law, because sadly his first wife died, but the brother-in-law was still alive, and the brother-in-law took the same story and made it into a song, went around and couldn't find anybody to sing it until he found someone, which I'll tell you about after we hear the song. He was sort of feeling a song about someone who feels sorry and sad because of their plight. That's why he wrote Rudolph. It was for her. So, but the other part is, and the guy that wrote the brother-in-law is named Johnny Marks. And Johnny Marks wrote some other stuff, lots of Christmas songs. The one that maybe is most famous of these was, which I hear Andy Williams in my ear singing, is the most wonderful time of the year. It's the most sweater, you know. Absolutely. So that's sort of, you know, and of course there's a zillion other Christmas songs that we became within a whisker of doing, the Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire, which is Bells Our May song. Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful stuff, you know. But also, yeah, so now I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And shift gears into our second cluster. Hang in, you survived the first cluster. You wouldn't lie to me. The second cluster, we're going to focus then on someone who was very, very concerned about, being an American, I suppose. And this is a young guy who was born Israel Berlin. Irving Berlin, right. Israel Berlin was born in Belarus. We checked. Yeah. In 1888, and his father was a cantor, and they lived in a little shtetl. And when he was as tiny as could be, the Cossacks came and staged a pogrom and burned the shtetl down. You know, generally raped and murdered and all that stuff. And he survived with his family because they hid in a field nearby and watched. So picture if you this little boy watching, you know, this horrible, horrible travesty. And as soon as things calmed down, his father collected the family and they came to America. And then settled on the Lower East Side of New York, and his father struggled to make a living. I think he worked as a butcher, I think, for a while, but wasn't doing that well, and then his father died. Irving was, I want to say, 8. And then he felt that he was a burden to his family, so he ran away from home. And he basically lived in the city streets, starting at that point in his life. Anyway, he eventually climbed his way out. He would perform, he would sing songs, and he would sell newspapers, and he worked in what was called a singing stooge, which means that they would go into a vaudeville house, and someone would sing a song like by Shining Harvest Moon, and then they'd plant someone in the audience, you know. So after Nora Bay sings, Shine on, suddenly inspired, God knows why, someone randomly stands in the audience and sings it right back. And the audience goes, oh. You know, and that's what he did. The little things he made living at. Eventually he ended up as a singing waiter at the Pelham Cafe in one of the worst neighborhoods in New York. And he specialized in singing dirty lyrics to popular songs. He wrote, the story goes that the Prince of Wales, you know, all polished and urbane, wanted to go slumming. He was visiting in America in New York. And he goes slumming, and he actually goes there, and he hears this. And this is the first reference in the newspaper about Irving Berlin. Because he was so impressed with this little kid and his dirty lyrics. That's the true story. Anyway, the other part of the story is that what happened is that there was a bar on the kitty corner on the other side from the street, and they also had singing waiters, right? And he said, and the owner there had 2 of his singing waiters write an original song and got it published. Well, our guy's not to be outdone, right? So he says, okay, Irving, you and this guy, you're gonna write a song, or else. Okay. So they wrote a song. There's a gorgeous lyric. It was called Marie of Sunny Italy. and it was published, and that's the first time you saw the name Irving Berlin. That's when he changed it. And it was a reasonable hit. He started writing songs, and he had a huge hit with, thank you, Alexander's Ragtime Band, which of course is not a ragtime at all. It's actually a foxtrot, but what do you want? Internationally, he became huge. Anyway, time passes, and there's lots and lots of stories to tell. He gets married at a certain point to Dorothy Getz, and unfortunately they go to Cuba for their honeymoon, and she contracts typhoid and comes back, and she dies within a month. It's heartbroken. And he would not date or anything for many years. And then 1924 rolls around, and I see 1924 as a really important year for this really important man. And a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is because in 1924, the Ku Klux Klan candidate almost won the Democratic National candidacy. Yeah, and he was at the convention. He saw this. He was terrified by it. And right after that, Coolidge became the president instead. He's a Republican. You know? And the first thing the Republicans did was they shut the gates that had been open for immigration. And he was terrified. He was terrified. And I think that you start to see this in a lot of stuff that he was writing and doing. It was, I think, crisis in his life. The other thing that had happened around that time, though, and I'm going to shift gears to a little bit more personal nature, because this is a man, of course, who's, he wrote songs that were Jewish songs, but he also wrote songs that were Italian and Irish and German and everything else, because that was the trend at the time. But then later on, of course, also wrote, things like White Christmas and Easter Parade, and was deeply conflicted about his Jewishness and all that stuff. Fine. But in 1924, with all the turmoil and stuff, as soon as he became money, he purchased, it's like these athletes do. The very first thing he did was he purchased a really nice place for his mother. Because they were in the slums. And he purchased, I think they moved up to the Bronx, something like that. And every Friday night he would go there and have a Shabbos dinner with her. But in 1924, she died. And this would close part of his life and open up another part. But he wrote a song about it. And let's hear it.
What'll I do when you are far away?
The only person who wasn't Jewish in that whole circle of composers was Pope. And Cole Porter was actually very good friends with Berlin. And in one of his songs, You're the Top, the Liszt song, You're the Top, one of the things he lists is a Berlin ballad. Gorgeous. Thank you. He writes this song, and it becomes a hit, you know. And anyway, soon thereafter, he's invited to a dinner party in New York. And he's seated next to a young woman. I mean, at this point, he's about 36, 37 years old. And he's seated next to a young woman who's about 20. And she was a high society girl, Deb. And her name's Ellen Mackey. And she's Catholic, which was unusual amongst New York's high society. And they sat next to each other, and she was very unusual for her generation. She was seen as kind of a trend leader. She wrote little pieces from a young person's point of view for like the New Yorker. So she was really quite formidable. Anyway, they started chatting, and the story goes that she sat next to him. At a point she turned to him and she said in her very proper, schooled way, Mr. Berlin, oh, you're the one that wrote that lovely song, What Shall I Do? And he turned to her, and he was very respectful and polite. He said, well, actually, excuse me, but no, it's actually, what'll I do? And she said, well, that's what I said, what shall I do? and the conversation started and lasted until she passed away at 85. That was 1988, and he passed away the year afterwards at 101. It was a lifelong romance. And very true. And it's funny because you say, on one hand, I guess he was frightened, I think, of being chased back to Russia as an immigrant, with closing the gates and all that stuff, And yet at the same time, it's not like, oh, he's drawn to her and as some kind of, like a green card or something. No. This is true romance. They started to date. Her father was appalled. He despised the fact that she wasn't dating someone who was from the social register, let alone this self-made Jewish man, middle-aged, with his accent, And so he did all he could to keep them apart. He sent her to Europe, and she spent a year in Europe, but they kept in touch. She comes back, and there's the Duke of Wales again. He keeps coming into our story. And he comes to America, and they host him at their cottage, the little cottages in Newport. Yeah. That's what we're talking about, the Breakers. Yeah. They had one. And she danced with the Duke, with the Prince of Wales. And we talked about this, and the wonderful thing about this was the guards were given the instructions that if Mr. Berlin shows up, see to it that he's not allowed in. But what do you suppose they were dancing to? It was all his music, including, no doubt, What Shall. Anyway, they got married. When they got married, they eloped the last second. He was actually thinking of backing out because it was just seemed so much trouble. Every time they married, they got on the boat, they go to Europe. Everywhere they went, every single country, they were front page news because it was such a scandal. Jewish man marries Catholic social life father objects. Can you imagine? I mean, like we talk about paparazzi now, but it wasn't like that. Well, it was sometimes, but not like this. Unbelievable. Anyway, but it was true, as I said, they ended up having several kids, and we'll talk about that in a second. But in the middle of that, he spent time writing a song, which he gave to her as a wedding present. He also writes the music, he reads both. And in the height of sophistication in the 30s and 40s, the man had hits in 6 decades. Unbelievable. He basically, as Jerome Kern once said, Irving has no place in American song. He is American song. True. Anyway, old man McKay disowned his daughter, so good thing she had the royalties perhaps. Except that what happened was 3 years later, this crash hit and he lost everything himself. And right about that same time, though, their first child together, Irving Jr., or actually it was Israel Berlin Jr., died in childbirth. And the old man came to the funeral and they reconciled. the truth of the matter is that though it was never really spoken about, Irving actually supported him the rest of his life. So complicated. Families are complicated. And it's interesting how circumstance can govern beliefs and prejudices and loves and understandings or misunderstandings. The last song for this first half, I'm going to focus on a little bit more here, is built around a specific chord. Why don't we start with that? I rest my case. I mean, is that, where the term is used as Yiddishkeit. That's Jewish. That's Jewish. That's 6 centuries of angst. Oh my, minor key. No doubt, lots of tissues in the audience. And yet, what's interesting is that he wrote in that idiom, but he was very aware of his audience, and he was very aware of his times. He always could keep a step ahead of everything. So he took that same chord, he had some syncopation to it. He wrote 2 different versions about it, and we're going to go through this. The first time, my colleague John will sing the short version. Then we'll explain what he did because of him as being a lyricist as well as a songwriter. And then you'll hear the whole thing, and that's how we'll end before our 10-minute intermission. Giant boots and a cane. But he had too much dignity for that. It's probably wise. What a great song. If you listen to it, as I said, the chord again, that's the entire song. So he's doing he's taking a Jewish melody, see, and he's adding syncopation to it. He is jazzing it up. Now I'm going to talk about his language for a second. So if you look at the last verse of that, just to point out how it works. Come, let's mix, where Rockefellers walk with sticks, or umbrellas in their midst, puts it on the Ritz. Right? Now you see, a lesser lyricist, and maybe one who was more, dare I say, native born, and therefore not as prone to play with the language, would have said something like, let me invite you to accompany me. It's just the come let's part, right? Let you accompany me, mix, where we will interact with the most well-to-do and respectable of folk, American folk, in New York City, who probably are going to be in the Upper East Side, right? The Rockefellers, where they walk with sticks, because the men would therefore with canes, and the ladies would with parasols, in holding on to those gracefully and properly in their gloved hands, right? And their gloved hands now become mitts. Right? Now, then you go one layer above, you say, wait a second, this is a funny song, because that's a nice little song. But if you go one step further, you go, wait a second, who's he singing to? Who would he be singing to with a Jewish melody? He'd be singing to his own people on the Lower East Side. And what's he saying? He's saying, listen everybody, here's what I did. Here's how I made it. Here's how I got past old man Mackey. If you get dressed a certain way, and you act a certain way, and you behave a certain way, you know, so that you fit in America, the American dream is yours. The price is assimilation. Right? Now, there's a little funny thing. It's a word called assimilation. It's a word called acculturation. Assimilation means you give up entirely who you are. Acculturation means that you stay who you are privately, but in publicly you will take on the language and norms and behaviors of the dominant culture. Right? And that way you can do it that way. Irving's very confusing in the middle of all this. And it's been sort of a source of confusion and trouble sometimes for Jewish people because, what do you mean you're white Christmas? But, you know, what's his name? Philip Roth, a great play novelist, once said something like, well, you know, the thing about Irving Berlin was he made Christmas into a song about, he made Christmas about nostalgia, and he made Easter about fashion. In other words, he de-religiousized them. And I think that's brilliant. And it shows you what he was able to do. So it's called slang. It's remarkable efficiency of language. And it shows how every single word in that song matches every single note and rhythm, doesn't it? And we don't even think about it. But it's instructions in the American dream. So, sans Frankenstein costume, sans cane and hat, but armed with pizzazz, personality, charm, intelligence, and a terrific voice. But listen to it closer now.
Have you seen the well-to-do up and down Park Avenue on that famous thoroughfare with their noses in the air, high hats and narrow collars, white spats and lots of dollars, spending every dime for a wonderful time. If you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Oh no, it's different types. Wear a day coat, pants with stripes, and cutaway coat, perfect fits. Oh no, it's strolling up the avenue so happy, all dressed up just like an English chappie, very snappy. Come, let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks and umbrellas in their midst. Oh no, it's dressed up like $1 million trooper, trying hard to look like Gary Cooper. Super duper. Come, let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks and umbrellas in their midst. Putting on the Ritz. Putting on the Ritz. Putting on the Ritz.
We have 10 minutes. We'll see you back here again. Welcome back. Well, we were talking about Irving Berlin, and it's interesting, in the first section we sort of looked at these songs written by Jews that were, you know, Americana, right? And then we sort of look and say, well, here's Irving Berlin, and he sort of takes that form and then he makes it, well, his own, but he also reinvents the American song. You see what I'm saying? Isn't that cool? Well, now we're going to look at another person in particular named Yip Harburg. Who? That's good. That means we get to teach you something. It's by the end of the program, we went, oh yeah. I know Yip. Well, his real name was Edgar Yipsel Harburg. So, I mean, Yip came out good, you know. He was born in 1896. He died in 1981. Yip Harburg, you may not know his name, but you know him. How's that? Yeah, Ib Harburg was a lyricist. Now here's the story. He grew up, he was born in New York City, a Russian Jewish family. His father was Orthodox. They were dirt poor. And in time, he became a businessman, but he ultimately became really a hardcore socialist, and ended up being blacklisted by Hecht in 1949, 1950 or so. But he came back. But when he was a kid, he, the New York public school system, the PS system, right? Well, I said that, we talked about this before, that within a few blocks of each other, in the year 1895, 1896, there was something like 5 or 6 composers or lyricists, who basically, the people that invented the American musical, they all grew up there, within a few blocks of each other. Now, in this particular story, Yib went to public school, like I said, and they set everybody up in alphabetical order. You know, you're just going to sit here. So, being H for Harburg, he was seated between, I guess, the G and the I. Anyway, the kid in front of him was the G, and they found they liked stuff. They had a lot of similar interests, and they liked poetry, and they liked verse, which is real popular, and maybe because Jewish people were into the word and literature and ideas and so much, but witty stuff. And this kid said, "Hey, come on to my house." That's what they said, literally. We would quote from it. Yeah. Because they both shared a passion for something called the Bab's Ballads. The Bab Ballads were actually a collection of lyrics by William Schrenk Gilbert of Gilbert and Sullivan fame. Gilbert was the hero to these guys. So he went over, and the kid said, "Oh, let me play some of this stuff." I guess there must have had some kind of something to play on, because he did. And he had never understood, Harburg had never understood that it was actually written to music. And it opened the world to him. Oh my God, this is for music? I love them just as language. Anyway, he was there when certain thing happened, which I'll tell you in a second. But later on, he went into business, and then the crash hit in 1929. And he was in the electronics business, but he had to quit because he didn't have any business. And his pal said, "You know, why don't you start writing stuff?" "Oh, right, nothing else to do." And this just launched his career as a lyricist. So what we're going to do is, you're going to hear first 2 songs by him. And I always say that these are the 2 songs, when I teach my own students about this, I always say, to my way of thinking, these are the 2 songs that defined 1930s America. They're the yin and the yang of 1930s America. So you'll hear both of them. Think about it in those terms. And then I'll have some more comments, and we'll introduce the last of the 3 songs we're going to do of Harburg's. But I will say that, well, let's do this first, and then we'll summarize. John.
When there was earth to plow and guns to bear, the sun, brick
you knew this guy. Isn't that pretty? But you know, they're yin and yang. They're yin and yang. One is gritty to your nose, this is the tough stuff, and the other is, wait, there's a better world out there. And he understood that. He understood both of it. He was political. He was a lefty. And sometimes he got into trouble for it. But also he did some remarkable stuff. Maybe one of the best shows ever written, but it's dated. Well, it's not dated because of politics of, dare I say, today. But it's dated insofar as if you can put it on the Broadway. They actually did a revival about, I want to say 10 years ago. I think it's 2009. Actually, maybe it was 2014 even. But it didn't do that well on Broadway. The show's called Finian's Rainbow. And Finian's Rainbow is about a leprechaun and his assistant who come to America searching for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And meanwhile in America, there's a little problem in the South, which is called, well, racism. And by the end, the wishes come true, and they change the bigoted white Dixiecrat senator. So he wakes up one morning and he finds he's black. Whoops. When the show, it has one of the most remarkable scores ever done. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous. One song after another is terrific. And the story also goes that, again, all these composers and artists, pretty much, they socialized together. They hung out together. And the remarkable Oscar Hammerstein, who's a hero of mine, I think he's just an amazing man in many, many ways. But when he saw Finian's Rainbow, he sent a telegram to Harburg, and he put his sentiments very clearly. He said, "Would you marry me?" True story. It was the show he had written. And he was no slouch. He wrote like South Pacific, in terms of these kinds of issues himself. He did okay for himself. Now, by the way, just as a side note, anybody know who the G was who sat before H. Harburg? Ira Gershwin. Ira Gershwin. And I was his pal that got him into the biz, And he was actually there, he was at the house, so the apartment, rather. Harburg was the day that they took a crane to lift a spinet in the window for Ira to use. And Ira never actually even used it or anything, but unbeknownst to them, the little, hell-raising brother who was on roller skates in the street all the time goes there and sits and starts playing. His name was George. Yeah. But Harburg was there. Anyway, so we're going to look at a song from this. So I'm saying, here's somebody who's sort of saying, you know what, I am an American. In America, maybe you can do better. Maybe it's in a weird way the next generation after Berlin. That's why I like looking at them. But also, this music is unbelievable. So here's really sort of I'll call it the motif song from Finian's Rainbow. It sort of introduces us to it. And we talked about before, there's a lot of shows that were written by Jews in those years that were all seemed to be set in England or Scotland. Right after World War II, like Brigadoon, But this is one of them. And I'll explain why after you hear, which I find just a haunting song. Music by, and by the way, before I forget, I'm sorry, brother, can you spare a dime, right? Mm-hmm. Music was by Jay Gorey, and Gorney. And Jay Gorney, by the way, apparently the story goes that he heard the melody when he was a small child back in Russia. It's an old Jewish folk melody. Brother, can you spare the dime? He must have had some heck of a, nanny. Brother, can you spare a dime? All right. No, but really. And then and the music for, who wrote the music to Summer of the Rainbow? Harold Arlen. Harold Arlen. Anyway, so let's music by Burton Lang.
I twinkling eye goes smiling by, and does she walk away sad and dreamy there, not to see me there. So I ask each weeping willow and each brook along the way, and each lass that comes a-sighing to Raleigh. How are things in Glockamora this fine day? How are things in Glockamora this fine
We had a rehearsal on Thursday, and John sang that, and I just kept thinking, oh, I want to see musicals. So beautiful. A couple notes on that song. First of all, this man's ability to paint images. It's like painting, he's a scene painter, isn't he? You can picture each thing he describes, so the brook, and you can picture it, you know? It's remarkable. You know, he's also responsible, he invented the whole, the lullaby lead, and all that stuff from the Wizard of Oz. That's all him too. But in how are things in Glockamora? First of all, Glockamora doesn't exist. I've looked it up. I've tried. And apparently the phrase came from Burton Lane, by the way, whose real name was Kushner. I have a good friend named Kushner, and we have a rabbi named Kushner, and there's a guy in D.C. named Kushner. They know something about Glockamora. But Burton Lane came in and said, oh, Glockamora, that sounds sort of, like Irish. And I heard someone once say that they thought that the derivation actually came from some Yiddish phrase. You know? But I can't find anybody who knows Yiddish well enough to confirm it. You know? But what everybody does agree on is, and if you look it up, it's supposed to be Ireland, but let's face it, it's Jewish. It's a Jewish melody. And why is it Jewish? Because it's a lost world. It's a song about the land we came from. And this is 1947, this is right after, dare I say, World War II and the Holocaust. What was the world that's been lost? Sad and fond and loving. And America's a hyphenated nation, it's a nation of immigrants. Everybody comes from a Glockamora. So it's a universal language. Thank you, Mr. Kushner Lane. Okay. Okay. Oh, and by the way, let us not forget, it's also a musical about what? Two Irish people who, granted they're imps. They're leprechauns, right? Who are immigrants. Damn it. Oh, okay. With that in mind, let's switch gears again then to our fourth cluster. But now you know who Yip Harburg is? So if people ask you in the future, you won't be able to say, well, I don't know. And you'll go, oh yeah, there was some program, the guy up there, and there's some song. But that's better. The last section is really about, for lack of a better word, people who've been in America and grew up as Americans, Jews though, and were very comfortable identifying themselves as Americans. Every single one of them. And yet what's really kind of fascinating is, for lack of a better word, underneath the surface, they wrote some songs where underneath the surface, bubbling forth is their immigrant background and experience. Now when we talk about immigrants, we're talking about someone who comes from a different country, who has to learn new language and new what everything means, right? And also in the case of these generations, mostly landing, I guess, in New York, and seeing that not as, you know, a New Yorker may say, oh, gee, look, it's sad what's happened to the Lower East Side. You know, I remember when it was just good German people or just good Irish people, and now it's this group that, you know what I'm saying? But the people who grow up there, that is America. So it's interesting how this stuff bubbles forth. So we're going to look at 4 songs. And the first one, and by the way, there's many more songs and composers to talk about for Jewish voices in America. You know, and I write about some of this in my book. That's called a plug. But you know, I mean, there's so many more we could do. So this is kind of, well, we used Whitman's sampler before. So here's a Whitman sampler we're giving you today, but there's so much more. But what wonderful stuff to draw from. So this is the piece of chocolate that has like coconut in it. You know? And up until 1924, if you went to see a Broadway show, most of it was influenced by England. A lot of it came from Gilbert and Sullivan, but there was a lot of English. That's how Kern got accepted into America. He kept writing stuff here, wasn't successful. He goes to London, ends up writing some stuff there, comes back here, people think he's English. English, then we'll do your stuff. That's the truth, that's what happened here. So, you know, oh, it's English. Well, but at a certain point, this is going to change. Right after World War I, you start having these shows, they're called Cinderella musicals. And they're really kind of interesting. I mean, people think of like, My Fair Lady is a Cinderella musical, right? But it actually goes back to the serial, like 1919, shows like Irene, stuff like that. And really what they were always about was usually there was a working class Irish girl, and she's working maybe in a clothing shop or something like that. She's a shop girl. And she inadvertently meets a guy, and of course they sort of take a liking to each other. And it turns out, unbeknownst to her, that his father basically owns the steel trust. Could happen. And they fall in love, and Dad doesn't necessarily approve because, you know, first of all, she's Irish, and secondly, she's poor. Oh my God, are we in the middle of the Irving Berlin story again? Right? Yeah. It is the American dream. It's the other one. Maybe it's the same one. Anyway, that's the truth. And then they would get married, and sometimes the husband would get this, you know, like the father would cut him off, whatever. And they're wonderful shows. They're really popular about 3 or 4 years, and there's other ones later. But the music is very 19th century Americana. Lots of waltzes, and very sweet, and stuff, but stayed. This is the era of long dresses, ladies, and long hair. But then came the 1920s. In 1924, as I said before, they closed the doors on immigrants. You know, and especially the 2 groups they didn't want. They didn't want people from Eastern Europe, and they didn't want people from Southern Europe, which meant they didn't want Jews and they didn't want Italians. Well, aren't they all anarchists? No, but that's what that was. But they closed the doors, but not before the Jewish presence established itself on Broadway. And the way that really happened, the first really strong sense of that in terms of what I'll call a Jewish identity. No, it was not Fiddler on the Roof. That would be interesting. No, actually what it was a show by these 2 brothers called the Gershwins. And it was called Lady Be Good. It was 1924. George had been plugging, he was in Tin Pan Alley playing the piano for anybody who came in. Nowadays you just simply test it, you know, and say, oh, well, download that. George? Is that That was just bizarre. Anyway, but he was a song plugger, and he became, and anybody who was in showbiz would go to these song pluggers and say, hey, you got anything for me? I'm going to be on tour again. And he became really good friends with his brother and sister named the Astairs, Fred and Adele. And they said, someday we're going to do a show together. Yeah, right, whatever. Someday we'll be famous. Someday we'll be stars. Yeah, right. And of course, that's what happened. His stars did really well. They go to London. Everybody thinks that they're really, of course, remember England? They must be good. They're playing croquet with the Duke of the Prince of Wales, of course, right? So they must be doing really well. They come back, they do a show together, and it's called They Be Good. And they do a show, it's nothing plot, really. So why is this Jewish? Because it is modern, urban, contemporary, young jazz. Now, there was black jazz nearby in 1922. There's a show called Shuffle Along. And people now will say, oh yes, well that was actually, it was not Broadway. Sorry. Black people were not allowed on Broadway, this is the truth. All these people like Gershwin and stuff would go and watch the show. That's the truth. But white people weren't doing this until Gershwin. So when you're talking about a show like that, you're talking about a modern, contemporary, urban, American experience, young people. And these young people were, well, largely Jewish. So it's a Jewish sensibility. And that's what they brought to it. Boom. 3 years later comes another show that actually has a strong Jewish sensibility, I kid you not, called Showboat. And it similarly is asserting the rights of people who are not nativists to own part of America. That's what it's about. That's what the Gershwins are doing. Anyway, so in honor of the Gershwins, we're going to start with what I call the auto accident song. And why don't we just start with that, and then I'll explain why we call it the auto accident.
Life has just begun. Jack has found his Jill. Don't know what you've done, but I'm all a thrill. How can words express your divine appeal? You could never guess all the love I feel. From now on, lady, I insist. For me, no other girls exist. So wonderful, marvelous, you should care for me. Soulful nights, paradise, what I love to see. You made my life so glamorous. You can't blame me for feeling amorous. Oh, so wonderful, startled that you should care for me. Don't mind telling you in my humble fashion that you thrill me through with a tender push. When you said you can't imagine my emotion, I swore then and there permanent devotion. You made all other girls seem blind. Just you alone filled me with
also that John, since he sang it the other day, has just brought so many more colors and life, and it was really fun. Thank you. It's fun working this stuff. Anyway, the traffic accent, because it's, well, again, it goes back to this notion, again, what immigrants are going to do. Well, some of you are there. How many words do you know in English? You know, like 5. You probably aren't going to speak them very well. Someone talks to you, just listening for the one word you recognize, you know. So, you know, you're going to boil it down to English to its sort of basic stuff, you know. And then also, if you're Jewish, you might be playing with language, that's kind of what you do anyway. Slang. So 1920 slang is really a Jewish thing. And Gershwin was one of the masters of it. His nickname in the field was the jeweler. George would give him a melody, and he'd go to lock himself in a hotel for 2 or 3 weeks to write one lyric, to get it just right. Wonderful. And why? Well, because, of course, here we go again, like we said before, it should be what? It is so wonderful, right? But they had to slam on the brakes. So what happened to your car? It's wonderful. That's why I call it the traffic accident song. Okay. Anyway, so similarly, now we have Jews on Broadway, we have jazz on Broadway. It's the brand new young people's thing. Broadway is the start of the golden age in a sense. It's not going to peak till the 1943, really. When you think about Broadway, you really start with the 20s in a lot of people's minds, with the Gershwins and a lot of shows. And another duo comes along that really were beneficiaries of this, who were young as well. And they had teamed together, they worked on school shows together. They're both from New York City. And they had done something, I told you last time it was like 20 shows. I think that might be right. All of which were flops. And they were about to pack it in. Meanwhile, the Theater Guild, which was the producer for serious stuff like Eugene O'Neill, in the summer wanted to do something light, so they were going to do follies. Everybody was doing follies, sort of short skits and songs and light entertainment. And they did one, and it was called it was at the Garrick Theater, so they called it Garrick Gaieties of 1925, you know. And these two guys wrote 2 songs for it, and they were about to quit the business. The 2 guys were Rodgers and Hart. Dick Rodgers was literally ready to go into the ladies' underwear business. It's true. It's very odd. But these 2 songs, and as a result of this, the show, instead of running like 4 or 5 performances, ended up running several weeks. And were huge hits. Now, one song, which we're not going to do, was called Mountain Greenery. You know that one? Where God paints the scenery? Yeah. You can picture God. And we're going to listen to the other. But I'd like you to listen close, and I hope you know the song. If you don't, I hope you learn it and love it, because it's wonderful. And it's part of the Great American Songbook. But I also want you to listen to the lyrics, because it's kind of what we're sort of doing with that. So.
What is known as Old Manhattan will settle
fans of Rodgers and Hart in general, so. But you know, it's really funny if you listen to something. He says, yes, well, I have a flat in Old New York. Do anybody know where Old New York would be? That's the Lower East Side. Now, it was Delancey, and the breeze blows gently. You ever been on Delancey Street? I mean, excuse me with the breeze, if it brings anything, it smells garbage. And then my favorite is the push carts gently go by. You know, it's an in-joke, you know, because that's where they were living. And of course, the boy and the whale.
You can't just spoil.
You can't spoil it, you know. So as I'm saying, where they're coming from is bubbling forth. And of course, by the way, Rodgers and Hart, and they all went to Columbia University. They're educated, you know. I'm saying it bubbles forth. They had the confidence, maybe in a funny way, more confidence than their parents had. But they could do that stuff. But they had the education to do it. So go figure. Anyway, 2 more songs for this afternoon. The first one is written, well, by, let's put it this way. You know, George Gershwin died young. He died in 1937. He was 39 years old. He had a brain tumor. The very first song Gershwin ever had as a hit was called Swanee. Swanee, how I love you. How, yeah. And it was written with lyrics by a guy named Irving Caesar. And the story goes that, of course, George died young, and one person wrote, George Gershwin died today. I don't have to believe it if I don't want to. Yeah. Anyway, so the story goes that in the about 1930, he died in 37, in the early 40s in New York, Irving Caesar was at a party, and he heard this young man play the piano, and he called someone. He said, you won't believe this, but there's another George. It was a young man named Leonard Bernstein. And remarkable. And Bernstein, of course, wow, what didn't he do? You know, he wrote, and of course he wrote, he loved American jazz and popular music and popular culture as much as he loved classical music. And he was an author and an extraordinary conductor, but he, of course, was also a remarkable composer. And while he wrote beautiful, I mean, I was a kid, I remember singing the Chichester Psalms. Beautiful, you know, and the Jeremiah. You know, it's just extraordinary classical music. Trouble in Tahiti, you know. But I also think he was perhaps our finest Broadway musical composer. I mean, that's just my own feeling. It's just pure music. Anyway, in 1956, he had written 3 shows already. He was working on, well, he had written 2 shows already. He was working on his 3rd and 4th simultaneously. Simultaneously, literally. Some days he'd go, write the song for this show, and work on this. And the 2 shows couldn't have been farther off from each other. And one of those shows was about these, well, sort of Romeo and Juliet thing, you know? It was, yeah, the original was actually supposed to be set in the Lower East Side of New York, and it was supposed to be the competition between the Irish kids and the Jewish kids. And it was supposed to be called East Side Story. And it's really funny because you look at the score, at the very beginning, you know, you have the gangs appear before they meet, you know? And you have the, of course, everybody says, it's shorthand for West Side Story. Right? And then the da-dum-da-dum-dum, da-dum-da-dum-da-dum, you know, all that stuff. And then they run into Bernardo, of the Puerto Rican, the Sharks, you know? And right then, as designated in the score, the music changes to announce him. But and that's still there. It's funny because it's residual, though, from the original version, when it was all about Irish and Jews instead of about Puerto Ricans and Americans. Because, do you know what it is? The music goes, da-da-yum! What is that? Shofar! So now it announces Puerto Ricans, I don't know. So it's all in there. As he's working on this, though, he's also working on a 17th century pastiche of light opera that's designed to be a satire of the narrow-mindedness of the 1950s and an attack on HUAC, in particular, House American Activities Committee. He wrote it with Lillian Hellman, It was a flop. It only lasted seven or nine performances, but was revived later. We were talking about that earlier. To great success, and it's called Candide. And what's amazing about it is that some of the stuff that he wrote for Candide ended up in West Side Story, and some of the stuff that was intended for West Side Story ended up in Candide. I don't know. Maybe he had like different shelves and he was sleepwalking. How he could do this, God knows. But again, here we have a guy who is born in Boston, educated at Harvard, becomes a protege of Koussevitzky and spends a lot of time at the Berkshires, and ends up as the head of the, and writes film music like for On the Waterfront. He's everywhere, and ends up, of course, as the conductor of New York Philharmonic. Overnight success, literally. It was broadcast nationally, and the original conductor got sick. He was unbelievable. He was everywhere. Lenny had some friends, and they would be in the Village, and he'd go there and hang out with them and play the piano for their little nightclub act. And the people in that were a woman named Judy Holliday and a guy named Adolph Green. So they would make up their own little satiric, fun little songs and acts and routines too. So he loved doing everything. And not surprisingly, he loved writing lyrics. And originally, he was the original lyricist for West Side Story until Arthur Lawrence came in, who was writing a book for it one day, and said, I got this guy, and maybe he can help you out a little bit. Yeah, bring him in, what the heck. You know what the kid's name was? Stephen Sondheim. And Lenny eventually kindly ceded his part of the royalties to him, because he was so respected what Sondheim did for that show. Aside from the fact that the name Maria is repeated 14 times, which is not great songwriting from a lyric point of view, but a gorgeous song. Anyway, with that in mind, a song that Bernstein bubbled forth with all of his Ivy League education and all of his high culture affiliations and associations, and is an icon of the classical music world. Here's a song he wrote that I think from Candide, that sort of bubbles forth.
Now just imagine an old woman with a half a buttock.
Yeah. It was eaten by pirates.
I was not born in sunny Hispania. My father came from Rovno, Gubernia. But now I'm here, I'm dancing a tango. Die. I am easily assimilated. I am so easily assimilated. I never learned the human language. My father spoke a high Middle Polish. In 1/2 hour I'm talking in Spanish. Por favor, toreador. I am easily assimilated. I am so easily assimilated. It's easy, it's ever so easy. I'm Spanish, I'm suddenly Spanish. And you must be Spanish to like the natives do. These days you have to be in the majority. Mis labios rubí, trae dog montre cher ami. Oui, si, ya. Yes, dada, je ne sais quoi. Mis labios rubenio. Mis labios rubí, dos rosas que se abren allí, conquistan mi corazón y solo con una divina canción.
still would have worked, I think, John. I think they would still vote for it. You know, goodness gracious, you know. Of course, Candide is about what? It's about someone who's a bastard in a kingdom, and so and then he gets in trouble, so he has to flee, and he basically goes from country to country to country. Gee, whose experience is that like? Anyway, the last song we're going to do this afternoon was actually written by, it's funny, all these other people we've been looking at, mostly, I mean, except for Berlin in a sense, were raised as Americans, you know? And they were sort of getting back in touch with the Jewishness or not, whatever. But this is somebody else, and he came to America full-blown, already an internationally regarded musician and composer, with hits already. So we have someone who is, as an adult, experiencing something brand new called being an immigrant. And it's one thing to say, well, gee, I was raised this way in this country. But he's coming from another place where he felt that he was part of that culture and then found out he wasn't. His name was Kurt Weill. And then when he was a big success, and he was classically trained with Sony, he was a classical composer of the highest order, and wrote things like The Rise and Fall of Mahagoni and the Three-Penny Opera and all sorts of wonderful, wonderful pieces, and he's a classical composer. He also loves show music. Comes to America. Well, why? Because of Hitler. And after that, he called himself Kurt Weill. He felt betrayed. And he came to America, to work on a show in 1935 or 6 called Eternal Road, which was written by Franz Werfel and basically was put together by most of the Jewish artists in New York. That was a celebration of Jewish history, and it was done in defiance of Hitler. It was a huge spectacle. They got an old theater to build this huge set and everything, and it was very successful. Anyway, but he stayed on. He looked at American musicals, which was sort of, he recognized as his venue. That's the place he really wanted to work. He felt that they were too simplistic. He felt Americans were too innocent. And he was, of course, German, and they were all cynical anyway, you know. And he brought that kind of sensibility with him, but he said, you know, I'm trying to improve American musical theater. And he really, during his lifetime, the only person that was his rival was Richard Rodgers. And he was Rodgers' rival. Unfortunately, Kurt Weill died at age 50 in 1950. But what's really interesting is two things. One is we're going to hear his song in a second, but I wanted to say that the last, he wrote wonderful things, and he wrote about America. And not just America, though, but one of the most beautiful things, I mean, for example, is Street Scene, right? Mm-hmm. Which is just gorgeous music. And great ballads, and heart, and as well as about sentiment. And Jews and Italians and Germans all living next to each other. And the libretto was written by Langston Hughes, a black man. So he was bringing his politics, not his politics, it's too heavy-handed a word. This called his openness to bear, like his Jewish sensibility. And I think what's really remarkable, my wife and I were talking about it on the way here, that, you know, it's funny because he didn't write the words, but it seemed he worked with a different lyricist almost every time. He worked with Ira Gershwin a couple of times. He worked with Maxwell Anderson a couple of times. And basically, he moved from person to person. But it seemed that whoever he worked with, suddenly their work had a deeper, richer quality and asked larger questions. And I think nothing embodies that more, perhaps, than the song we're going to listen to. And it's a song that he wrote for a show called One Touch of Venus, 1943. And it was written as a vehicle for Mary Martin. And the story is about a statue of Venus. And there's a young guy, I think he's a barber or something like that. Yeah. And the statue comes alive. And he falls in love with her. And then, well, things happen, because it is a musical after all. If you don't know it, go on Wiki. You can probably find it on YouTube. What's also really interesting, though, is that the person he asked to be a lyricist on the project was Ogden Nash. Ogden Nash, you know, this guy writes these little quippy, funny little snippy things, right? But what he wrote here was something so intimate and so powerful and so much about passion in the heart, but also about what does it mean to be a newcomer? And how does one negotiate for one's survival? In the only language that she understands, really. So I think it's interesting because it's sort of like bringing the German to America And then in America he says, and of course at the same time, forgive me, but also street singing, I mean, he's using blues. There's a song called, oh God, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a boogie woogie number in street singing. You know, he's using everything. And the last show he was working on when he passed away was actually, of all things, his adaptation of Huckleberry Finn. And he's writing these very simple melodies, trying to imitate the sort of freshness and simplicity of American, what do you want to call it? Folk? So it's weird, on one hand we could say he was making American music more sophisticated, but America was also making him more American. This song was written in the middle of that, and I think really is maybe a lot of what we're talking about here for all these people, so I think it's a fitting way to perhaps end our afternoon. Listen to the words.
Tell me, is love still a popular suggestion, or merely an obsolete art? Forgive me for asking this simple question. I'm unfamiliar with her heart. I'm a stranger here myself. Why is it wrong to whisper I adore her when it's painfully obvious I do? Does love embarrass her, or does it bore her? I'm only waiting for my cue. I'm a stranger here myself. I dream of a day, of a gay warm day, with my face between her hands. Have I missed the path? Have I gone astray? I ask, but no one understands. Love me or leave me, that seems to be the question. I don't know the tactics to use. But if she should offer a personal suggestion, how could I possibly refuse when I'm a stranger here myself? Please tell the stranger, my curiosity goaded, is there really any danger that love is now unfolded? I'm interested especially in knowing why she wasted his romance is so fleshly. Is that why you wasted? What is your minute foible? Is she rubbing more exquisite? Is skiing more enjoyable? For heaven's sake, what is it? I can't believe that love has lost its glamour, and passion
want to say what a joy it's been to work with John and with Bill and with Pamela, and what a wonderful group you guys are. It's really a joy and a pleasure. Thank you. We have some little exit music we're going to play with this, which is just fitting. And we're going to, now, what's the word? Retire to the food. And I'm supposed to be on duty and sign things. Please come by and say hi. We'd love to meet you. Thanks so much.